Greetings, everyone. P. Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Monday Night Must See TV with the Hudson Valley Squares, and it's also our first episode of 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. We're here to talk death metal once again. We've got a killer album war, five classic death metal debuts. But before we start, let's introduce the crew. Nick Franco is in the house.
What's up?
Count Ralphus is in the house. Chris Allo, the King, is here tonight. We haven't seen him on here in a while. He is back, better than ever. And Ryan Scow, the Rock, is here, of course.
What up?
Come on, gentlemen.
What's going on, everybody?
What's
Happy
up?
New Year.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. What better way to kick in the new year than to talk five classic death metal albums, right?
I agree.
Yeah, I thought the last one we did was really great, and I was looking back on it today, and a good amount of people have watched that. So for everybody who complains in the comments occasionally that I don't like death metal, well, you know what? There seems to be a lot of people who do,
We're
and
back.
we like to throw it in every now and then. And I think this whole concept of doing these album wars with these classic death metal releases is a lot of fun, but also very difficult because I thought today's was really hard. Not that the last one wasn't, but we'll see how we figure this all out. So we got five of them. Let's Ralph is going to hold each one of them up. So we're going to start. The first one we're going to introduce is probably the granddaddy of all of them, maybe the one that started everything. Seven Churches by Possessed, 1985 Combat Records, a classic of the genre, kind of merging thrash with this early thing called death metal. Great album, and a bunch of us got an opportunity to see them live not too long ago because Jeff Becerra is still out there making it happen out there on tour. The second one we're going to introduce here is released in 1987, Death's Scream Bloody Gore, also Combat Records. Arguably the first true death metal album, right? Because I think Possessed still has enough thrash elements in it, but we could sit and talk about this when we are putting our list together and ranking these, but great stuff nonetheless. Number three from 1989, we've got Obituary's Slowly We Rot, Roadrunner Records. And ironically enough, didn't we have Scott and Randy Burns did the production on all the ones we mentioned so far. So the Burns folks did a lot of producing of all these death metal records early on. So Obituary Slowly We Rot, album number four is from 1990, also on Roadrunner Records. We've got Deicide, self-titled. There we go. I always love that cover.
Cool
Yeah,
shit.
it's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like a cool
whatever the hell it is, it's awesome.
Satanic door knocker.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's Glenn's door knocker.
Yep. And last but certainly not least, also from 1990, this one on Earache Records, Left Hand Path by the Swedish band Entombed. So it's the only non-American album we're going to be talking about today. And that gets my vote for the best cover out of all of these right there.
Oh, damn.
Yeah,
Super.
this one
Yeah,
you can
cover.
really look at forever.
Oh,
DNC
yeah.
grade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
DNC
Amazing.
grade for sure.
Yep. So I think it's pretty safe to say all five of these pretty influential on the scene going forward. It's amazing, like no matter how many times you've listened to these albums, to go back and re-listen to them all, like back to back to back, like getting ready to do this episode, is to kind of hear this style of music so early in its infancy, right? And to kind of like really understand and realize like how much the death metal scene evolved over in the coming like years after these albums all came out. So it's just kind of cool to kind of revisit all this stuff, no matter how well you think you know it, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do two trips around. The first trip around, everybody's gonna give their number five, number four, and number three. And then we'll circle back around for number two and one, and then we'll add up everything and we will declare a winner. So, Nick, you're going to start us off today with your five, four, and three.
Oof, alrighty. This
Oof,
was
Morrow.
extreme.
Yeah, Wolf
What's
is
that?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, this was brutal, and it drives you nuts trying to put them in order until you realize that you are trying to put perfection in order. So before I begin, I'm just going to say that these albums are all 10 out of 10 out of 10 out of 10. So
Yeah,
all we're
exactly.
doing is try to sort them amongst themselves. But as far as where they fall in the rest of like the world of death metal, these are just, this was very difficult. I had my eye on this for a while. So with that in mind, My number five pick, and again, this is like picking between children over here, but I'm gonna possibly surprisingly to some, my number five is Deicide, is the self-titled by Deicide. It's probably the most like outwardly evil intent album here, but as far as the results, I don't know. I think Dead by Dawn might be, if you had to take all the songs in these albums and put them together, the song Dead by Dawn for me might just be the most ferocious um decapitation by sound that you're getting. The vocal attack from Glenn is just, I mean, savage. And this album came out on June 25th, 1990. At the time, and in 1990 itself, it was like literally just before I was going to get into all this stuff. I was just entering high school, and I was probably afraid of all these bands at that time, but then I saw the light. So I've loved Deicide since high school. What can you say about Eric? Eric and Brian Hoffman are just, an unbelievable guitar duo. This album has the attitude, and it has the spirit of black metal in it. I think, it was death metal, but there was that anti-Christian fervor on this album, was, and even some of the vocals were so inhuman that it was definitely in that black metal realm. So, I'm gonna come up with number five with that, and then from there, oh God, I've been all day long. I've been like shuffling these in my friggin' head. Um, I'm gonna go with for number four. I'm gonna go with Obituary, Slowly We Rot. Um, I love Obituary. I still love Obituary. Every time they play, that I can see them, I will. I don't. There's something about the way they sound, the way just their whole thing, that I think they haven't. They just embody death metal to me. So for Slowly We Rot, it's absolutely like early Celtic Frost, Hellhammer worship. Um, they sound so, the vocals are so filthy. I remember first hearing this band and saying like, and all my friends would be like, I don't think he's actually saying anything, and I'm like, well, wait, no, I did hear some. So I don't know what the official story is on that with John Tardy. If like there's maybe a paragraph worth of words and the rest of it is just sounds and the vocals, but whatever it is, it was working. I'd say my favorite track on the album is the title track. But I wrote down a couple. I think Till Death is amazing, and Stinkupus, even though it's such a weird name, that's a fucking good song. Intoxicated, um, yeah, it just kills. But for me, like if I was ranking like Obituary, I would put Cause of Death above Slowly We Rot. I think Cause of Death was their perfect album to me. Um, the Morrisound studio production here, they really nailed the early Celtic Frost sound. They really it just sounds like that to me. So that's my number four, and then we're doing number three as well.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure that so Roadrunner was like, you gotta write some lyrics for the second album, because
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
what they was doing, and it's pretty awesome that they were doing that, because they were using the vocals as an instrument, and it was just fitting in. But yeah, a lot of it is just growling away, and they were actually prompted to write some more lyrics for the second album.
Yeah, I can sing along more to the second album, without a
Yeah, you
doubt.
can sing along to the first one too. You just got
Well,
to make the
slowly,
sound.
gotta-
You don't
you
got to know
gotta-
what
you
you're
gotta-
saying. You just gotta
slowly we dwell. Yeah, no, I can kind of do
follow
it.
the groove, follow the death groove.
Yeah, I used to sit down and try to write what I thought he was saying out, and when I was a kid, instead of doing my homework, anything.
Your
But
guess is as good as anybody's.
yeah, yeah. But no, it's super quality shit. And now, I mean, it just gets really hard now. For number three here, I'm gonna go with Death for number three. Scream Bloody Gore. I have it. It's again, it's funny. Like if I'm ranking death albums, I put Leprosy a little bit higher. But this I can't imagine hearing this when it came out. Um, I just can't imagine it. It's obviously fucking amazing. It is often considered the first death metal album, pure death metal album. Whatever they were doing, it fucking worked. His voice is just so goddamn good. Chuck, R.I.P. And they were so young. Um, he just his fucking vocals are just amazing. I think the early Death albums were just fucking priceless. And I remember getting this in high school, and I used to listen to what the fuck was the name of the song? I used to listen to Zombie Ritual over and over and over and over again.
So,
Yeah. So that's my favorite song on it. And yeah, I mean, there's not much that's already, we all know how seminal this was. Like when this came out, for as early as it came out, like it absolutely was a bar setting album that, just fucking, it was chaotic. It had a little less, it was less worried about all the technical structure that would come to define them later. Give it to me like this. I think Leprosy was as technical as I wanted them to get, just for me. But yeah, so those are my bottom three, even though they're fucking 10 out of 10 albums.
I still remember like it was yesterday when that album came out, and I was sitting in Rock Fantasy, and Steve Keeler convinced me to buy it, and I took it home, and I was like, "Whoa, the hell this is?" Because I had the Possessed album before this, and I had
Yeah.
the Celtic Frost stuff and everything, but I was like, I don't think I was prepared for what I was hearing on this. But I
Mhm.
was told, lyrically and everything, I was like, "Oh, that's horror movie shit, right? Gotta love it." It was just blew my mind. It's just great, great stuff. And then I saw them like shortly thereafter live, and that was unlike anything I'd ever seen before,
Mhm.
in a concert stage. So very cool. All right, awesome. Ralph, let's move over to you. We'll get yours and Steve's picks.
All right. So I guess I'll do Steve's really first here. His number five is Possessed. His number four is Obituary, and his number three is Entombed.
Okay.
Kind of surprised he put Entombed over Obituary because I know he's friends
He's a
with
big fan. Yeah, I know, right?
yeah, and a big fan, but maybe just that album. You're going by the album. Um, so yeah, this is just like Nick said, 10 out of 10 albums. These are all super important to me. And all last month, Pete did on his channel, he did his everyday story behind the album, which I thought was awesome. Great idea. I liked hearing that, like, that little story about the first time you heard an album. So I started thinking about the first time I heard this album, and I'm gonna go number five. It's like Nick was saying, that's like so hard to put any of these last. Last time we did this episode, and I thought it was impossible to rank. I had a real hard time with the last one. This one, for some reason, as soon as I heard the bands, I wrote them down. I gave them all a listen to see if anything changes, but I was kind of shocked that nothing changed. But I'm going to go with Obituary. And what I remember about the first time hearing this was so me and a couple of my friends with this guy, Mike Gigi, rest in peace. We go to Rock Fantasy, and we got to a point where it was like you wanted to be the guy that discovered the next band. So you kind of went by like looking at the back, seeing what t-shirts they had. You could kind of tell with a band like Obituary, it's going to be something brutal. So my friend Mike, he grabbed Obituary and Beneath the Remains, and we were calling them Sepultura at the time. We didn't know they were called Sepultura, but I always remember he bought both of them, and my purchases that day were probably two bands or a couple CDs of of a band that I already knew I liked, and my other friends did the same. But he took like the chance that day, and then just looking at it on the ride, we were like kind of like, look at this shit, Obituary, and they were on cassette. He bought them both on cassette, but he put the Obituary in first. And when those vocals hit, we were just like, "Whoa!" And the riff. We were kind of making fun of him at first, just for taking a chance on two albums and not buying anything that he knew was good or not, But that's just how it was back then. And I'll just never forget. He had a great stereo system in his car, and on the way home, we blasted that Obituary, and it was just holy shit. And Sepultura, we heard Schizophrenia. One of our friends had that album, but they were still kind of new, and we didn't really know it that good. And we were blown away by that too. But um, the one thing going back on this album now is I always think that the vocals were just a little too loud in the mix. And it's a little too overpowering. But I love it, and at the time it blew me away. But going back, I guess putting it at number 5, that would be the one tiny thing that I would say is that the vocals were too high. But I mean, it kicks off with Internal Bleeding. A band been going for years called Internal Bleeding. There's another song called Suffocation. We got the great band Suffocation came out of that song. Godly Beings, slow and heavy as fuck, Till Death. It's got this death groove that they invented kind of basically, and they stuck with it throughout all these years, and they've experimented a little bit here and there, but such a great album to start their career, and I love this album. All right, so now my number 2, I'm gonna go Entombed, Left Hand Path. This is like, there's just so many crushing riffs on this. The title track is amazing. It has that sick phantasm part. All the horror fans out there, I know, gotta love that. When you heard that the first time, you're like, what the fuck is this? You knew it sounded familiar, and then you realized it was like the phantasm music, but then they started playing like this brutal riffs over it and shit. It was fucking so cool. Drowned, But Life Goes On, Morbid Devourment, Abnormally Deceased, The Truth Beyond. I mean, all these albums, I can name every song on them, but man, this is so amazing. And that incredible Dan Seagrave artwork, just incredible. Sit there looking at this the whole time while you're listening to these great down-tuned, the guitar tones on this album, just unbelievable.
Nasty.
Never heard really anything like that. Yeah, even though it came out like a little later in the game, not for death metal, I mean, it's still really early. That's the thing about the first waves of death metal. It was just like the first waves of thrash, where every band had a little bit unique of a sound. They didn't all just sound exactly alike. It got to a point with death metal where everybody had to have the guttural vocals and this and that. And like, the vocals on the Entombed album, it kind of remind me of Possessed a little bit. He had like kind of like a Jeff Becerra kind of sort of vocals, but he has like some little clean vocals here and there. And just all these bands, the whole first wave, all the bands, they all had a unique sound. And it was mainly because the vocalists didn't all copy each other. It seems like once Cannibal Corpse really got big, that bands started kind of emulating them the whole time. So yeah, my number 3 is going to be Deicide. This was unbelievable when it came out. I mean, Lunatic of God's Creation, Sacrificial Suicide, Dead by Dawn, Blaspherion, the song Deicide is amazing. Crucifixation. It's just so vicious. Glenn Benton, his vocals are so demonic. The way they did it in the recording studio, where he do the screaming, scratchy vocals, and then the really satanic, evil vocals on top of it. There was nothing like that. When I heard the production on this, I love the production on this. People might complain today about it, but at the time, everything really stood out, and the drums were just like pummeling the whole time. I really loved the viciousness of it all. It was so evil. It was like pretty scary album at the time. Like it kind of was bringing back the scary element. Like when I was a little kid and I first heard Merciful Fate, that's kind of the feeling I got when this guy with a burned upside down cross on his head came about and started screaming this insane shit. So yeah, Deicide, I don't, in a weird way, could have been my number 1 album because it was such a great album. It was one of my albums of the year it came out. But
There's
yeah,
2 of them.
go number 3.
That was me.
2 scows.
2 scows
yeah.
facing each other, but they're one.
There can be only one.
That's how Glenn Benton was on that album. It was like
I would-
two
I figured
Glenn
I'd give you a
Bettons
taste of
singing
that.
at the same time.
I've been waiting for the last 6 months for my computer reboot. Sick of using my phone. Anyways, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right,
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Allo, let's move over to you.
Okay. Yeah, this echo everyone's statements. This was a tough one. Although for me, the really tough part was 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 5 were kind of easy, even though they're all classics. 2 stood out for me more. And the number 5, yeah, it could be blasphemy for some. But you know, I like Scream Bloody Gore, but it's probably my least favorite death record. I'm not a prog guy, but I certainly personally prefer the more technical, more proggy death than the early stuff. I mean, my favorite death record is Sound of Perseverance, and my number one concert for 2024, bar none, was Death to All when they played Sound of Perseverance from start to finish, and it was so good.
Wow.
I saw it in New York City. I was mad at myself that I didn't go the night before because they did 2 nights, and the night before they played all of Scream Bloody Gore. While it's not my favorite record from them, I'm like, man, they were so good, this lineup. I'm sure they would have fucking killed it. But I do like it. I just prefer the more technical side of death. But yeah, Scream Bloody Gore. That's a classic. Number four. I'm going and like I said, 2, 3, and 4 were tough because it's a hair. They're all a hair away from one another. I went Entombed, Left Hand Path. It's a great record. I mean, that guitar tone is just, that chainsaw guitar tone is just so unique. It's heavy, but yet it's got that Swedish injection of melody, even though everything is still so heavy and would be such an influence on the whole melodic Swedish death metal scene, which would be its own true scene later on. And yes, definitely Ralph noticed, the first time I ever heard it, yeah, I was like, wait, it's the fucking theme song from Phantasm. And I interviewed the director of Phantasm, Don Coscarelli, for Pit Magazine, and I mentioned it to him, and he had no idea. He said he was going to look it up. I don't know if he actually did, but he thought it was really cool that a metal band would take a piece. And I mean, he knew metal because he directed the Last in Line video for Ronnie James Dio. But yeah, so number 4 for me, Entombed, Left Hand Path. And this one, 2 and 3, I was flipping back and forth, but I'm going 3. Possessed, Seven Churches. I just love Jeff Becerra's just tortured vocal style. Like, to me, it sounds like you're just fucking stabbing him and like just slowly pulling the knife down. He's like, ah! I think that's such a unique vocal style. Yeah, he is still going, Pete. God bless him. And I remember the very first, the only time I saw the original version of Possessed was in 1987 at Lemoore in Brooklyn. It was Possessed opening for Megadeth, and I remember I only had money for one shirt, so I bought the Megadeth shirt because it had the dates on it. But I'll never forget, and I never saw the shirt since, but I always remember, Pete, Possessed, the shirt, the only shirt they had, it just had the logo on the front, and on the back it said the new king of death metal. And even then I remember going, this is 1987. I go, well, who's the old king of death metal?
Yeah.
Like, it was so weird, you know what I mean? Like, well, you're claiming this throne from somebody, but well, who's got the throne now?
Yeah.
So
And what the hell is death metal, right?
yeah,
exactly.
because at the time, that was it. I don't even know if this was summer, like May of '87. I don't even remember if Scream Bloody Gore was out. I don't even think I even had it yet. But I always remember that. I always remember that T-shirt. And
That's
of course,
weird because I was at that show, Chris. I was at that show.
oh, no
and
kidding.
Yeah. And the really amazing thing about that show is, and I didn't know it at the time, but that was the last time the
Yes.
original Possessed ever played.
100%.
That was
Oh,
the last
ever?
time.
Really?
I know it was
ever.
the last
That was
ever,
the-
like in the
That was
New
the last
York
time
area.
Larry Lalonde. That was the last time Larry Lalonde ever played with them.
Wow.
That was it. I went to a show, Jello Biafra in the Guantanamo School of Medicine, and he had the band Negative Approach opening up, and the drummer at the time was a guy that was in the band Seduced, and they were also on that bill that night.
Yes,
if you
they were on
remember.
first.
So that guy, I was hanging out with him, and I said, "Oh, I seen the band Seduce," and I told him that show. He goes, "Hey, that was the last time Possessed ever played." He goes, "We did that whole tour," and he was like, at the end of the tour, that was the last night, and they were like done after that. And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh shit, I never heard that before," But that's how I
crazy.
knew that.
Yeah, they did those 2 nights at Lemoore, and I guess I always just assumed they did a little something else before breaking up, but wow.
Yeah, that
Now I
was it. I
really wish
think
I would have.
maybe like Eyes of Horror was coming out like right at that time,
Yes.
but they didn't tour for it or not, and that was
Right.
it. Like
Yeah, that was
they
the.
had the shirts and that was it.
Wow. Yeah, now I really wish I would have bought that shirt.
Yeah, I don't remember even. I
Hindsight
probably didn't have
2020.
the money for the shirt.
I would have loved to have seen him back then.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, I don't know if Ralph thinks different to me, but I thought Megadeth was good, but I thought Possessed blew him away.
I just thought they were both amazing at that. I mean, that was Peace Cells. I loved
Yeah.
Megadeth. I loved Possessed. I loved them both at the time. I was huge Beyond the Gates fan. Yeah, that show was definitely one of my favorite shows. Seduce was definitely out of like shouldn't have been on that bill, but
Yeah, I don't remember catching
it's
them.
a great. Yeah, I caught them, but they shouldn't have been on the bill.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo what all you guys were saying. This one was almost impossible. These are really good albums, and like Chris said, I think my number one was the only one. I was like, that's definitely gonna be my number one. But the other ones were all variable. So I'm gonna echo what some of you guys have said. My number five is also Obituary. Great album. I still kind of go back and forth if that or Cause of Death is my favorite Obituary album, but these two are great. Uh, yeah, it's just fucking heavy, nasty. It's like they took the Celtic Frost sound and did something kind of unique and different with it too, instead of just cloning Celtic Frost. And Tardy's vocals obviously are insane. I'm not gonna say my favorite, but they're very like over the top and like they leave a tremendous impression on you, especially on this album more than anything else they did. You got Alan West and Trevor Perez punching out these fucking disgustingly heavy riffs. It's like a fucking earthquake in the room. But like we said, someone's got to be five, so that's number five. Number four is I know I get shit for this sometime, but well, I love the band. I have every album they ever did, and I pretty much enjoy every album they ever did. They're not one of my favorite like overall bands, even though they're very good. But I get shit for that, and that band is Death. Uh, I love them, but they're just other death metal bands that I'm a bigger fan of. But this is my favorite Death album. It actually is my favorite Death album, and I like the other ones too. I like Sound of Perseverance, Richard Christie's fucking drums. I like Human. I think it's all good, but yeah, there's something about this. Just the duo, just Chuck and Chris Reifert on drums, and Chuck did everything else on this album. Chris's drums are fucking monstrous. Obviously, he would go on soon afterwards to form join the Incredible Autopsy, which everybody loves. And I'm a much bigger Autopsy fan. I don't know if that colors my opinion all, but yeah, this album's insane. It's heavy as fuck. Infernal Death, Zombie Ritual, Denial of Life. Every song on here just crushes. Obviously I was too young to listen to this when it came out, but it's still as soon as the first time I heard it, it still left a huge impression on me because I think I heard Individual Thought Patterns first, which is a good album, but it's much proggier and not the same thing. And then I heard this, I'm like, okay, now I get it. Now I see like kind of where their legends started. So that's my number four. And my number three is gonna be the one and only Deicide. The only reason I put this as my three is because when it comes to Deicide, admittedly, as much as I love this album, Legion, their second album, is definitely my favorite. That one I fucking love. But this one it's close behind it. It's got the coolest cover they ever did. One of the coolest covers ever. You got Glenn Benton's satanic door knocker there. I would say though, of all these albums, this is probably, I think Nick said it, this is probably the fastest and most like aggressive and like blasphemous album. Uh,
And vicious.
I'm gonna tell you, I don't know if his name's been said yet, but Steve Ashim's drumming on this album can punch a hole in your
Crazy.
chest from a mile away. It is insane. And you think for 1990, there really wasn't a lot of albums that had like that kind of stuff. Like you had Lombardo and Gene Hoglan, Slayer, and Dark Angel, respectively. And you obviously had like the first Morbid Angel with Pete Commando on drums there. But Morbid Angel's album only come out, I think, like what, a year or less than a year before. So it wasn't like everywhere yet. So yeah, Steve's drumming on this album is just out of the fucking world. It is intense and it fits the guitars so well. It is just, I don't know, it's just a
So
fucking
tight.
album. It is tight as
He
shit.
had more of a Slayer vibe. He had more of a Slayer vibe
He
than
did.
than
He
like
did.
the Morbid Angel, like just the pure, like it was definitely more broken up, like a Slayer kind of vibe to it.
The way Steve utilized double kick drums and blast beats back then, which it was phenomenal. It really added a lot of intensity. He obviously combined with the Hoffman's guitar playing. Yeah, and every song on here is great. Carnage in the Temple of Damned, Lunatic of God's Creation, obviously Dead by Dawn. Uh, yeah, this is an incredible album. So, and again, this could on some days I'll wake up and I'll be like, this is number one because it is brutal. I think they got a little more of that on Legion. That is like the peak to me. It's just ultimate of like speed and like this blasphemous intensity. But this is a damn good album. And I actually say it's a little catchier than it's probably the catchiest album they ever did. I'm gonna give them credit for that.
It's way catchier than Legion to me.
I think,
It's
yeah,
my favorite Deicide album, but
Are we
I just
sleeping
that
on
was the
Once
thing when
Upon a
Legion came
Cross?
when Legion came out, I thought it was not it was more brutal, but it wasn't like as catchy. But then Once Upon a Cross, Serpents of the Light became catchy
it was a
again.
little catchier, yeah.
But I remember being a little disappointed when Legion came out. But now when I go back to Legion, I fucking love it. But I still think the first one's my favorite though.
I feel like Legion's playing. It's a lot more. I don't know the word for this, but it like jumps around more, and I love that. It's like very unpredictable, almost like erratic. Very very.
Yeah,
It
it's
adds a
not
lot
as
of
catchy.
brutality.
It's a little more intricate. It's more
It is. It's a little
intricate for
more.
sure.
It makes it feel more violent too, like a lot faster, more aggressive. But yeah, as soon as you hear like "Lunatic of God's Creation" kick in, and Benton's vocals too, like you guys were saying, like the way they tracked the high and the low vocals and kind of did them up. Nobody's ever really done that before or since.
Yeah.
And if they have, it's like you're just ripping off Deicide. So it's always kind of been his thing.
Macabre kind of did it before them, but
A little
really
different,
it
but
was
yeah,
different. And yeah, it was different, but they were the one band that I could think of that kind of did that. And then Carcass was sort of
I was
doing
going
the
to say,
same sort of thing, but they were
yeah,
doing it with two different
yeah,
people,
not at the
you know.
same time. So
two
there
different
was you had
vocals.
different guys going back and forth. Yeah, the
Yeah.
way you like double tracked it, it's fucking cool. I mean, it's a great effect. It really worked well for them. It added like this like inhuman feel on top of this
Yeah,
warp
very
speed
unusual.
fucking
Oh
drumming.
yeah.
So
Demonic as fucking hell.
it is. That is my number three. Great, great album. And this is I'm gonna say of all these albums too, this is the best one for lifting weights. That is the damn truth.
I
Deicide
think
in
it's
general, but yeah,
I think it's the most brutal out of all these albums.
it's definitely a
Oh,
good
for sure.
weightlifting.
I think it's the most vicious of
It
them all.
is. I think yeah, it's vicious and it's definitely it goes on a lot if I'm lifting weights. It's a constant that and Legion are always on there because it's appropriate.
Yeah, these are all five of these are absolute classics of the genre, and I think a couple of you guys kind of hinted at it earlier. I think that they all sounded very unique from each other, and me trying to like rank these was kind of difficult. So I wound up going because musically there's great stuff going on all these albums. So I wound up like looking at the vocalists for all these albums and thinking, okay, well, I'm going to use the vocal approach as my way to kind of separate these from each other. It was really the only way for me to do it. So my number five is going to be the Deicide, which I think musically is probably the most intense out of all of these. And I agree 100% the drumming is off the charts great. Uh, the riffs and the solos from the Hoffman brothers are just absolutely insane. It might even be the tightest album musically. I have had like a love-hate relationship with Glenn's vocals all throughout the career of the history of Deicide. Um, so ultimately, I put this at number five because I think I just prefer the other vocalists a little bit more. That's what it came down to. So Deicide is going to be number five for me. Number four, I'm going to go over to the Swedes with Entombed. It's my favorite Entombed album, although the one that comes after this is really, really good too. But uh, I agree the guitar tone on this album is just like it's just ridiculous. I think the only thing I can compare it to is like Electric Wizard, like Dope Throne. That's how like harsh and like distorted and buzzsaw it is. Totally different style of metal, but that's really the only thing that even compares to it. I like the fact that there's probably the most variety on this album to an extent. I like the fact that there's like little doomy parts and there's some kind of groovy metal stuff going on here, but it's all really, really catchy. I mean, I love the opening title track, But Life Goes On has some killer riffs. Supposed to Rock is just chaotic and just really, really cool. Bitter Loss, great. I think it's a really, really cool album, and I absolutely love the cover art, like I said before. So that's going to be my number four. And my number three, I'm going to go with Obituary, Slowly We Rot. I agree. I think I like the second album more, but I still think this is really, really great. And I absolutely agree. The Celtic Frost guitar tones are like all over this album. and John Tardy's vocals are just filthy,
Hmm.
absolutely filthy. And he have like he's half the time you don't even know what the hell he's screaming about, but it's awesome. I love I mean, the blast beats are just all over the place here. There's just loads and loads of riffs. I also like the fact too that they do some kind of slower songs or songs that start off kind of slow and doomy, and then they pick up speed in the middle, then they go back doomy again. So there's also a lot of variety on this album too. But I think no matter what pace they're kind of playing at, I think it's all just really, really good. And it's just a classic death metal album from this period. Like I said, they would get a little more refined going forward, but I think it's a pretty kick-ass album. So that's my number three. And let's go back to Nick.
All right. Yeah, what you're saying, Pete, reminded me that, all of the gentlemen that made these albums were all raised on the classic metal. Like
Yeah.
that's the cool thing about this explosion of death metal and black metal that took place around this time, and thrash and everything, was that all these guys as kids listened to all the real classic stuff, and all of that runs through these albums, which is just so cool.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, and I did a little research while you were. So apparently the way that Thomas Skogsberg, the producer of Entombed, and obviously Uffe Sederlund, and who else played guitar in there? Um, Nicky Anderson.
Again,
Uh, yeah, they used a PV amp and a Boss heavy metal distortion pedal.
oh, Alex Hillen. Did you say that name?
Alex, what I say? I'm sorry, Alex.
Yeah, Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson was the drummer.
I've only been doing this YouTube stuff for 5.5 years. I still can't extemporaneously perform.
Which, now that you mentioned that, when I was
Yeah.
a kid growing up or a young kid, when I was a young guy growing up in the early mid 80s, I had a cheap little PV Bandit amp and I had one of those old Boss heavy metal distortion pedals.
You could have invented Swedish
And I
death metal.
used to play chainsaw guitar all the time. And I had a BC Rich guitar. So yeah, that's
It'd be Hudson Valley death metal if you
Pure
had done
Newbergian. Yeah.
that.
No, that's cool. And that's the thing that was what was so great about this era, was that they were
it's
just
simple, but it does the trick, right?
trying things
It's
out.
very
Yeah.
distinct. It has a distinct fucking sound for sure.
Oh, it sure does. And that brings us to my number two, which is Entombed. I had, it's funny. I haven't been the biggest, like I'm probably a bigger Obituary and Deicide and Death fan than I am an Obituary. I'm sorry, than I am an Entombed fan of all their work. But this masterpiece right here it's stylistically closer to what I love and what I loved anyway. And his vocals are unbelievable. The late great LG Petrov. Um, the melody in here, and the head, like songs like "Supposed to Rot," just fucking, it's like that beautiful Swedish death metal sound, and I love it so much. And the bands that they all kind of spawned off together and probably shared members, with that being Unleashed, Grave and Dismember. Dismember is probably my favorite like death metal band of all time. And I think when they were younger, Entombed was called Nihilist in 1987, and some of these songs were from the Nihilist days. And I think they had David Blomqvist in there for a little while from Dismember. So, you know, an isolated scene that produced just an unbelievable result. And this is a timeless album, Left Hand Path. It's really just 10 out of 10 out of 10. And you want the number one now,
Yep.
which obviously we know from not being bad at math that it's Possessed. And it's funny, if you asked me when I was like 18 or 19, I probably would have put Entombed at number one, or Deicide. But I spent a lot of time, going back and listening to these albums over the past little while, and you know, there is something so unutterably fucking magical about that Possessed album. Seven Churches. It's funny so they're from what, California, right? So they're,
Los Angeles.
yeah. And it's wild. And again, I don't know much about music in terms of how to play it and all that stuff. But to look at Larry Lalonde, right? I mean, no disrespect, but I consider Primus to be like one of the most horrific atrocities ever thwarted, ever, pushed onto mankind. I'm sorry. And yet this man is responsible for songs like The Exorcist, as well. I mean, and Jeff Becerra.
It's a great mystery of life, ain't it?
Yeah, but it's interesting because I wouldn't call this dude. I'm sure he's a metalhead in his heart. I'm sure, but he kind of was a passenger on like a quick. He got on one stop and got off the next stop when it comes to the good ship death metal. You know what I mean? Like he got on and then he got off, and he went and he did something so different. But it's take Amorphous, who we all know I love, their Elegy album, which is so fucking amazing, right? Some of the guys in that band did not come from the metal scene at all. They came from like the jazz fusion scene, prog and stuff, more like jazz fusion. And then they went on and continued in that realm. But when they were in that realm of heavy metal, they made something so fucking amazing. And the same can be said for Larry Lalonde. And I think, it is what it is, the songs on Seven Churches are just, I'm not even going to pick out titles. There's no point. The entire fucking thing, it's not just an album. It's a mood. It's a statement. It's like, I know I said that Deicide was probably the most evil album that we're talking about right now, but there was something more evil and possessed. Just Jeff's voice, as many of you have said. Uh, I love that vocal. It really does sound like he's summoning a sound from somewhere else. And I'd love to know, like, I mean, I just saw him recently. I think a few of you were at that show, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jersey. Yep.
yeah, you guys. And obviously Jeff is wheelchair bound. It didn't make a damn bit of difference in his voice. Obviously, whatever health problems he's going through, he still sounded fucking unbelievable. The guy is just forget it. So it really reinvigorated my appreciation, by the way, seeing them, and they blew me away. I mean, that whole night was great, but they were fucking they stole the show. So, um, yeah, what else can you say about Seven Churches? And I know Mike Terrell, the other guitarist, and Mike Suss. Am I guess saying that right? Seuss.
The
Yeah.
drummer, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those guys didn't really do much after this. So it's like these kids came together and again, Randy Burns, the producer, in 1985. I hear a lot of Kill 'Em All Metallica in a lot of the guitar, like the riffs behind some of these songs here, a little bit, like just that. Again, I don't have the words for it, but there's a couple of progressive riff sounds that happen in these songs that like take me back to like hearing, the Kill
No,
'Em
they
All.
were right there with them. They were right there when that
Yeah,
stuff was happening. They were right there.
yeah. So yeah, and I think my appreciation for this album just has just grown and grown, and I blasted it all day today. I was like, this is unbelievable. My poor daughter driving her to volleyball. I'm like, we're listening to Possessed because I got to talk about it later. And so I guess that's as much as I can gush on it right now.
All right.
100 out of 10
We have our first
winner.
place here. All right, cool. Ralph, Steven, yours 2 and 1.
Okay, so Steve's 2 is Deicide, and his number 1 is Death.
All right.
So
My first
my number 2 is Possessed. And so going by what Nick was just talking about with how much he hates Primus, I gotta say,
Sorry.
it was I've never heard anybody talk good about Primus on this channel. I think I wore a Primus shirt one time. I got that cool Primus shirt that looks like Beyond the Gates, but it says Primus. I wore
saw
it
that,
when
yeah.
we did that one episode where we were with the prog guys and we did like a combo. But anyway, um, when Larry Lalonde was in Possessed, he was fucking amazing guitar player. And it wasn't until he didn't get known as a great guitar player until he was in Primus. Primus is a band that, like, I would hate that kind of music, but what is that kind of music? They're so original. They were so off the wall. They're such a unique band. I could totally understand people hating the vocals, and it's a little too funky or whatever. But if you listen to some of the shit that Larry does in Primus, it's unbelievable. He's a fucking amazing guitar player. All these prog people, like, to me, I don't understand how Primus isn't like a Rush version of like the 90s, you know? Like, to me, Primus was fucking amazing. Um, I think the guy is an incredible musician, and he really got known to for what he was playing when he was there. And they look back, oh, he was in this band Possessed, you know. But Possessed was a groundbreaking band. But I gotta say, when I first found Possessed, I was already listening to Creator, and I was finding Possessed and Sodom and Creator and Slayer and stuff all at the same time. So even though they they coined the term death metal with on their demo they had before the album even came out, they had the song death metal, but then on the album they have the song death metal. So it kind of starts there, but at the time they were just a thrash band because there was nobody was calling it death metal, but they kind of should have been calling it death metal at the time, because bands like Celtic Frost and Hellhammer and Sodom and Creator and stuff, they were different than your thrash bands that were kind of really getting big at the time. So it should have kind of gotten separated then. But and even though they had the term and everything, it really wasn't until my number one album, Death, Scream Bloody Gore, when this came out, this becomes the template of death metal and everything changes. And I'm not saying it was much heavier than what Possessed was doing or whatever. They're both amazing, groundbreaking albums, but this is where it changes for me. And it's the song Zombie Ritual. The first time I have a story for the first time I heard that. I was at the bass player from All Out War's house, and we were kids, and his older brother collected everything. He had such an amazing album collection. He had like the Slaughter album and all this stuff. You know, it was like stuff that no one else was buying. And I remember hearing Death, Scream Bloody Gore, and Zombie Ritual stood out to me. And when it was over, I wanted to go back and just hear that song again. And that song just fucking killed me. It was the song that changed everything for me. Um, I love the sound of this album. I love fucking Chris's drumming on this album. Something about his drumming gives it a different feel than the next album. I love Leprosy. Leprosy. I was so right there. I mean, Scream Bloody Gore really changed my life. Like, as far as what I was listening to, it had to meet like this new expectation for me at that point. This was the template of what was going to be death metal, and everything changed after Scream Bloody Gore. It's one of the biggest like game changer albums for me in my lifetime, and I probably went like 25 years just like only listening to death metal and extreme metal after that. So it's one of the most important albums. I can't. I'm not even going to go through the rest of the songs, because Zombie Ritual was the song that grabbed me and changed everything for me. If I was going to say to listen to one song out of all these albums, listen to that song, and it's fucking amazing. So, Death, Scream Bloody Gore.
All right. Death takes the lead here. Chris.
All right,
Ooh.
my number two, I'm going Deicide. As everybody else had mentioned, I think it's definitely the most extreme of these five records. I think it's the heaviest. Yeah, many could say it's the most blasphemous, but I think Ralph's the one who said it. It's also, the songs are catchy. You know, there's something in the rhythms that makes it, catchy. And for me, I'm a song guy, and some of the other albums, the songs can, some of them can be a bit samey at times to my ears, but yet on the Deicide record, it's 10 songs. They're 10 classics. I think everything is unique. And also, to agree with what Ralph said, yeah, I didn't like Legion as much because it wasn't as catchy. So yeah, this is my favorite of the Deicide records. So it's number two for me.
We haven't even talked about the fact that the Deicide debut is only 33 minutes long, and almost every song on it is like 2.5 to 4 minutes. Has a lot to do with it too, I think. The fact that
Yeah,
they're very compact songs,
yeah,
and it's
real
like get in and get out real quick.
tight. Yeah, I think you said it, Pete.
I
They're
love that about
yeah,
albums. I love quick. I like fast boom
Agreed. Yeah,
punch
no,
you and
no, no
knock you
point
out.
in just dicking around for sure. Agreed.
Yeah.
So my number one is my favorite band of these five. Although this is not my favorite record from this band, a couple of you guys have said that already, and it's Obituary. Slowly We Rot. I agree. Cause of Death is my favorite Obituary record. I think that's their masterpiece. But I do really like this record. I think it's tons of great songs, and I think all of you guys mentioned it already, which is the thing that I love most about Obituary is that heavy Celtic Frost influence. And to me, this is the band of this record, I guess I should say, of these five records. It has the most groove to it. It has the most doom elements to it. And I know it was like 20 years ago. Was one of my first flyaway assignments. Roadrunner Records flew me to Florida for the Obituary reunion record, Frozen in Time. And I went to this racetrack in Florida with all five guys. But then at night, I hung out with Frank Watkins and Trevor Perez. And the three of us just went to some bar, and I got to really wasn't taping anything. I was just bullshitting with them while we were drinking beer, and was really talking to them about the whole Frost thing. And Trevor Perez told me, he's like, Chris, every day of my life I listen to Hellhammer and Celtic Frost every day. And then Frank Watkins told me, he and I then started talking Danzig and Frost, two of my favorite bands. And Frank told me he was also a huge, I mean, they're all of them were, Frost fans. But Frank Watkins told me that he was either Queens or Brooklyn as a kid. And he had to sneak out of his house in July of '86 and took a train or something to get to the Ritz in New York City to see Sam Hain in what was their last ever show opening for Celtic Frost. And he's like, it was the greatest show of my life. He's like, when I got home, my dad beat me. He's like, but I didn't care because I saw Sam Hain and Celtic Frost in 1986, and it was the life changing concert. He's like, after I saw that, I knew I had to play and I had to play an instrument and be in a band. So yeah, I mean, Frost is such a huge influence on this band, and you absolutely. I mean, we all hear it, and that's what I love about Obituary. I love the groove and doomy elements that they have, besides the speed. And yeah, that's my pick.
All right.
They should have had a song called Death Groove on there, and that would have been a whole new genre after
Right.
that. The way like Possessed had death metal, and Venom had black metal. If
Yeah.
Obituary would have had a song called Death Groove, then that would have been a whole new thing.
Then there'd be all these other bands copying them, and
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Then we'd have a real mess on our hands right now. All right, Ryan, your final two.
All right, number two, I'm going with the one with the best artwork, as we said, Dan Seagrave, Sweden, 1989, Left Hand Path. Not only does it have the coolest artwork, it's got a really cool band photo too. It's got that infamous cross somewhere in Sweden of those guys standing around. Yeah, this has got my favorite guitar tone of these five albums. Like I said, that PV amp mixed with that HM2 sound, which was ended up being ripped off by not only a lot of other bands, I wouldn't say ripped off, but like, used at the time by like a lot of other bands that went to Sunlight Studios and used the services of Thomas Scottsburg. But then when the new millennium clicked over, now there's like 400 billion bands that like rip off that sound. So, man, if you want to talk about albums that got cloned a lot and ripped off a lot, like I guess all of these albums kind of were definitely guilty of that. But it was like the whole Entombed clone became like a little world into itself. Honestly, a lot of the later ones I didn't think were very good, but this album is fucking phenomenal. It's definitely, I think, their best album by far. Like Clandestine, I liked, but the combination of like the sound on this, LG's fucking insane vocals, yeah, just that Phantasm whole section in the title track. Yeah, then I'm not even going to bother really mentioning tracks on this because this is the album. You just put it on, you let the whole thing blast. It's fucking heavy. It's pretty fucking evil sounding. Which I mean, all these albums kind of are, but this one too, it just has this creepy feel to it. And I mean, this album's also really responsible for like really kicking off the whole, Scandinavian Swedish death metal. I mean, there was the band Merciless, who was a little earlier. There was other bands obviously beforehand, and obviously the first really big band from Sweden was Bathory. But yeah, when it comes to death metal, these guys really kicked it off. And I even agree with Nick that overall I probably like Dismember more. But I just love that whole scene. You know, I love Grave, Dismember, these guys, just that whole world of music that came up. So this album is fucking awesome. And I would be remiss, I just grabbed it off the shelf. You did who mentioned it? Nick mentioned Nihilist, the earlier band. It was all the same guys from Entombed, plus Johnny Headland, who would go on to form Unleashed.
He's a good dude. I met
Did
him.
Nihilist. Yeah, it is a lot of the same songs. And if you can find it, there's a couple compilations with all the earlier Nihilist demos compiled together. It's really good. It's I know I like collecting old demos and stuff, for the historical value and just the sound and to see where great bands came from. Like even Death, like Scream Bloody Gore 87, but they had a shit ton of demos out beforehand, and they were earlier demos under the name Mantis too.
Mantis,
So
yep.
some of them sound like they were recorded underwater in a boombox in a cement mixer, but it's still cool. But these actually sound really cool. You can see how fucking young these guys were too, and they did this stuff. Great photos too. But yeah, that definitely a cool historical. If you've ever heard Entombed, you never heard the earlier Nihilist stuff, it is worth checking out.
They were 15 when they formed Nihilist.
Yeah,
15
they look all of like 12 or 15. They look very,
or
very young.
15. Yeah.
Ryan, that's sick that you have that on vinyl, but I actually have the original Nihilist demos on cassette, like the real ones, not just taped over ones that I got from Mary from Primeval back in the day.
That's a rare thing. Yeah, that's one of those things.
Oh,
Like,
And I have the Entombed Life Goes On, but Life Goes On demo too. I have the original of that too.
that is cool, and I love when bands do this too. When they do the gatefold art and it's all the collage of photos and stuff.
That's sick.
I
That's
always-
awesome.
Yeah, like demos like that. If you didn't get them like when they came out, you're never gonna get like an old Nihilist tape. It's just
Yeah.
it does they don't come up for sale because there's only a couple hundred and they want it to friends and whatever. So, but this is
I actually have an Nihilist T-shirt that I got from Mary, but I haven't seen it in forever, and I don't know where I misplaced it. So I hope I still have it. But I have an original Nihilist T-shirt.
and there's all the different demos that are on this.
Yeah,
too, so
that's the
that's
ones
cool.
I got.
But I'm gonna agree with Nick on this one. My favorite of these, and this was when we started talking about these. This album was pretty solid at number one. I didn't see any of these other four top it, and I love all of them, but it's got to be Possessed. Uh, yeah, I'm just gonna echo everything Nick said about this. The use of first off, the use of tubular bells from the movie Exorcist to open the title track Exorcist or the opening track Exorcist.
Great touch.
Incredible. The recording on this sounds phenomenal. The production is just filthy. It's raw. It's nasty. It's heavy. Now it's admittedly, you take like the Deicide album, you get Steve's drumming, which is very tight, locked in, and precise. Mike's drumming is not like that. It's a lot faster and sloppier and almost more punk rock in a way, but it's great. It fits the music perfectly. Obviously, you get Mike Torreo and Larry Lalonde's guitar playing is great, and Becerra sounds fucking possessed. Yeah, every song on this album is perfect. 10 out of 10 out of 10 out of 10, or 666 out of 666. And of course, it ends with the song Death Metal, too, which is worth noting. So, and they had a demo called Death Metal, I think in 1984. So, but yeah, you guys are also right that this does sound more like oh, here's another. I fucking love these. I love these collages. I really love that shit. There's a lot of thrash in here, too. And if you consider the fact that Possessed was an LA band, so who else was from LA? Slayer, who also kind of had that demonic, but mostly thrash. And you also had, the themes were different, but Dark Angel were heavy as fuck.
Yeah.
But to me, that was a trilogy of bands. Why I always like the LA bands more than the Bay Area bands. Between Possessed, Slayer, and Dark Angel, I'm like, that's the heaviest and fucking darkest shit. That's the best stuff. And I love Bay Area bands. Don't get me wrong. I fucking love them too. But yeah, plus this. Isn't that one of the greatest logos in metal? That is just
hell yeah.
nice, simple. There's nothing else going on here. Just a nice black cover, the logo, and the title, and it's great. And the band photos that they took for this cover, where they're all in some cemetery with like this cheap smoke machine, is just fucking just cool as shit.
The original has the 7 churches is just raised in black. It's all black here. It's raised. It's raised on the cover.
This is a. So I've had my CD copy forever, but this is one of the albums where I have an older vinyl copy. I don't think it's original, but it's older, but it's so beat to shit. At some point, I'm like, I actually want to listen to this, so I just have to buy a reissue. So I did.
It has that raised black Seven Churches. You don't see it in red the way you do on that one.
Yeah, this one is but still though, I love the fucking photos of these guys. That is an iconic photo shoot from '85. So this is definitely my number one. Great, great, great
It,
album.
Mike Suss's drums, like they were so like unorthodox. There was something so weird about the way he played, and like I remember when they reformed as Possessed, and they got a new drummer and everything, and I was thinking like, how hard is it going to be for this guy to try to play like this? Because it's so like different, man. There's like so many like long like kind of fills and going on, and it's crazy the way the drums the the structure of the drums on those albums are just unbelievable. No
Especially
one
on
like
like
them.
Holy Hell, like that song Holy Hell. He's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's not like that it's like perfect kind of drumming. It's just so unique drumming. It's a unique there's nobody that sounds like him. Like when you hear those drums, you can go, "Oh yeah, that's Possessed," you know?
The what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, the drummer that they had for a while when they reunited, because actually when they first reunited, they had all it was Jeff Becerra and it was all of one of my other fucking favorite LA bands, Sadistic Intent, who have also been around forever.
Yeah.
Never put out an
Yeah.
album, which is another thing, but that drummer was I think Emilio Marquez, who was a phenomenal drummer.
Yeah.
But he wasn't like Mike Suss. Like he was actually like almost like he could play like Morbid Angel kind of stuff, very fast and proficient. So it was cool to see the early Possessed reunion shows because I'm basically watching Sadistic Intent, who I fucking love. Who I don't know, I've ever said this on the show. They are, in my opinion, the best live death metal band I've ever seen, hands down. It's like taking a giant fist and just ramming it through your skull. So to have them as like the backing band for Becerra was, like this is fucking great. They played a show at Club Europa in Brooklyn. I'm going to say like 15 years ago. It was one of the earlier Possessed reunion shows. It was Mortician, a whole other bands, that band At War, Sadistic Intent, and Possessed. And it was like Possessed's first East Coast show, probably since the one you guys saw, uh, back in the 80s. And it was, yeah,
Yeah, I remember.
it was Sadistic Intent with, Becerra on vocals. But I think everybody was so happy to see him, they kept giving him drinks. So by the time Possessed went on at like 1 in the morning, he was fucked up. But it was still great. It was still fucking awesome. But yeah. Then unfortunately, the band that his whole band was from, Sadistic Intent, when they played before him, they were better than Possessed. And it's the same fucking band. But I guess it was their own songs that they've been more used to playing. So, but anyways, this is
And any of you guys read the obituary book, the obituary book that came out? They have a big story about Jeff Becerra coming in to do some vocals, but he's
Yeah.
so fucked up at the time, and
The-
like they couldn't even get one take out of him, and they spent all this money to fly him in, and it was like a big nightmare. But it's all in that obituary book.
yeah,
It's really
the guys in Obituary told me that story. It's pretty sad. It's a pretty
yeah, it
sad
was
story.
pretty fucking. They wasted money and time getting him
Yeah.
over here, and
he was down in Heineken's pretty
Oh
fast
yeah,
and furious at the Jersey show a couple months ago.
Frank Watkins told me he's like we wheeled him into the studio, and he was just sitting in front of the mic, and then they go the next thing you know, he pissed himself.
Oh, God.
So yeah, it was just not a good scene, and yeah, like Ralph said,
yeah,
they sent
the
him home.
obituary book's got a whole chapter
Yeah.
about.
But hey, he's better now, so God
Yeah,
bless him.
that's the
Good.
important thing.
Legend.
All right. I always love when it comes down to me as the final person and we have a two-way tie, which is exactly what we have right now. So we've got Possessed and Death tied for first place. And as everybody knows, those are my final two that I have not mentioned yet.
I
And
too.
the number one and two is very hard for me because I love both of these albums pretty equally, but you got to pick one over the other, right? So number two, I went with Possessed. I love it. I think it's great. I think you don't have a lot of these other albums without that album. I love the songs. I love the vocals. The guitar playing is immense. There's some great songs on here. Love The Exorcist. The title track is just killer. Satan's Curse, so good. Death Metal's a classic. It's a great album. Tomorrow I could wake up and I could be like, I think that's my number one. But I gotta go with Scream Bloody Gore as my favorite out of all these. And I will agree with a few of you. It's not my favorite Death album. I actually do prefer the more progressive and technical death stuff. Like I love Symbolic. I love Sound of Perseverance and Individual Thought Patterns in Human, and Leprosy is great too. But there's just something about this album. It's just so raw and primal, and just brutal, and I love his vocal style. I always have. And what's really cool about Chuck is his vocals sound a little bit different on every single Death album if you really listen to him.
100%.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
Yeah,
always
it plays
changing it
like
up a little
they,
bit.
they sound like two. If you compare this record to Sound of Perseverance, it sounds like two different bands.
Totally two different
Oh,
bands.
You would never think it's
totally.
the same band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris's drumming is great on this album. And, to me, Chuck is one of the greatest guitar players that ever played this style of music. He's just so good. And he's such like a great writer and creator of riffs and solos and whatnot. And we all know all the classics on here. I agree with Ralph, man. Zombie Ritual just like blew my mind when I first heard it. But, songs like, Mutilation, just so good. Sacrificial's great. Torn to Pieces, Evil Dead is killer. I love the title track. And what's really cool, we haven't really talked about it much. I mean, how influential was this album to all sorts of bands after it, including Cannibal Corpse? This whole idea of these kind of horror and gore-soaked lyrics, right? I mean, it just
Oh yeah.
exploded after this.
Well,
And
especially talking about that really quick is that Death has a song called Evil Dead, and Deicide, one of the albums we're talking about,
Dead
has a
by
song
Dawn
called Dead by Dawn.
yeah,
from
And
Evil Dead
then
2.
we
Yeah.
also have Deicide has a song called Sacrificial Suicide, and Death has a song called Sacrificial.
yeah,
So there's two little like uh very similar things right there.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so that's my number one. So obviously we have Death winning by a point here. But I will say, if we're to look at the overall list, coming in second place though would be Possessed because not only do they have 2 votes for first place, but also 2 for second place. So yeah, but Death wins this one today just by a
My
hair.
my 1 and 2, and your 1 and 2,
See
Pete.
that, Ralph?
We're the winners, Pete. Me and you.
Twinsies.
Yeah. But there's no losers here because like I said, all 5 of these are amazing albums, and
Fuck yeah.
it was difficult to rank these, but not much separates them. And it's funny because they've been mentioned a few times today, and I'll give everybody a little peek into the next time we do one of these. It'll probably be 2 episodes from now, but we've mentioned Dismember a couple of times, and our next death metal album war in a month or two is going to be Dismembers Like an Ever Flowing Stream, Grave Into the Grave, Cannibal Corpse, Eaten Back to Life, Gorguts Considered Dead, and Atheist Piece of Time. So again,
Huh.
another collection of 5
Very
really good debuts. Yeah. So that'll be really interesting to do. So stay tuned for that in the not too distant future here on the Hudson Valley Squares. And until next time, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together,
All the damn
all the
time.
damn time. Rank them as you like them down in the comments below. Please hit the like button before you leave and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And we'll see you next time here on the Hudson Valley Squares. For Ryan Scow, Count Ralphus, Chris Allo, and Nick Franco, and Steve Keeler, who did participate in tonight, even though he wasn't here. I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for
Participation
watching,
trophy for him.
everybody. And we'll see you real soon. Have a good one, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Later.